Hey, everybody. Welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I'm here with my friend, Chris Kline from Mobility Empowered. Chris, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. I know it's not an easy time of the year to get away and come hang out. So I appreciate anybody that's wanting to talk to me in August right now. How's this summer been for you? I'm always curious to hear.
It's not your typical summer. We're seeing peaks and valleys with the volume, and we're seeing many supply chain problems around the world. So it's kind of in service recovery has been kind of the theme for this summer.
What would you say? And we're going to get into all this stuff, but I have to know. I'm really curious because I have clients in various supply chains. Which is the most impacted supply chain in your opinion?
Domestic U.S. moving. Money can take care of everything else. It can't help the moving business. There's no amount of money to get a crew and a driver when there aren't any.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. That's so fascinating because I was just talking to corporate housing expert Tony Andel yesterday, and I was like, well, but I bet if you paid 150% of asking price, maybe you get a 3-month lease. She's like, well, maybe at 150%, right. But you're right. I had a dispatcher one time. I go in his office, and pardon the language, I go in Greg's office, and he was right off a truck. And I say, Greg, I need a truck in Milwaukee tomorrow. He's like, boss, I can't shit a truck. I'm like, Greg, damn it. All right, well, keep trying. Let's see here. We got a bunch of people checking in. If you are checking in right now, thank you. Hop into the comments. I want to know who you are, where you are. Give your company a shout out. Give Chris a shout out. Get active in the comments. I want to know what you think. We're going to be talking about the future of global mobility. We're going to be talking about the future of service delivery. We're going to be talking about digitization and all these tools. And I'm sure this is one of the hottest topics in relocation. It's probably one of the most polarizing topics in relocation, right after my favorite, lump sum. It's talking about digitization and what's the right balance and how do we do it right. And I think everybody feels like it's inevitable, but it's like, how do we do it in the appropriate way? So Chris, I'm going to ask you all these things and more, and I can't wait.
Awesome.
To hear what you say. Let's see who we got checking in right now. We got a whole bunch of people coming to us live. Hit that like button right now, pretty please. Deborah Burton, hello from Kansas City. Deborah, I got to ask you, best barbecue in the country, where's it at? I love asking questions like that. Just light a match, right, and see what happens. Let's see here, Chris. I'm going to ask you that. Chris, are you a barbecue guy?
Oh yeah.
Best barbecue in the country. Where's
Memphis? Memphis.
Ooh.
Got to go with Memphis.
So you're going to simultaneously disagree with me and Deborah.
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
I like it. He's got some fight in him. This is going to be good. This is going to be Memphis. Okay. All right. I'm a Texas barbecue guy myself. Austin, maybe. Christina, hi all. Sun's out, fun's out in Pittsburgh. Christina, that's great. Love it. Fantastic. Where in the world are you right now? Chris, where are you right now?
I'm in a town called Tarpon Springs, Florida. We're just north of Clearwater on the west part of the state.
And what is Tarpon Springs, Florida known for?
Greek food and sponges. We sit on a river that, for whatever reason, sponges like to grow there. And the Greeks settled here 100 or so years ago and made Tarpon Springs their home.
Yeah, the Sponge Docks is a lot of fun. If you're ever in like the Clearwater, Florida area, going on up to Tarpon, go eat some amazing Greek food, get some cigars on the dock there. Go see some stuff. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I love it. I used to live over in that area for about 6 years. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Ray Abbott, hello from British Columbia. What's up? Janaína, hello from Rio, Brazil, where 4G is not fully supported today. Yeah, Jana's having some internet issues. That's cool. It goes around. Janet Turner checking in, and hello from the Poconos. What's up, Janet? Janet's also a Floridian most of the time. Teresa Pope, hello from Phoenix. Elizabeth, great to see you. Chris.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Look at that. Everybody's checking in for you. Amanda Rakowski, hey from Phoenix. I want to know what you think about digitization and relocation. What's the future look like? Throw it in the comments. Jill Rush, so interested to hear what Chris has to say today. Jill's a friend of the program, Relocation Day. Jill, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your questions. Martin Mayott's getting a chant going in the chat. That's great. Marty party over here. Fantastic. Ray Abbott, Tippett Richardson in Canada. Jennifer Christensen, hi from Colorado. Jody Harris, hello, Chris.
Hey, Jody, long time.
I know. How cool is that? Look at that. Hey, Chris from Shannon, checking in. Shannon Barnes.
Hey, from Florida.
Look at that. Matthew Odike from Matthew. Are you in Denmark? I think you're in Denmark. Correct me if I'm wrong. Bill Rounds, home buyers preferred, checking in from Denver. Bill, the busiest man in Relo. Look at that. What's up, Bill? Hey, shout out to Bill. Bill's going to be at the parties in ERC. We're putting together some parties on Wednesday and Thursday. So if anybody's watching is interested in sponsoring those parties, we're going to donate a whole bunch of money to some charities and have a really great time up in Chicago. So if you're interested, hit me up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see, Richard Majewski checking in from London. Notice that sounds a bit like lump sum. Interesting. Yeah, so you know what? I'll start here. A lot of people think, Chris, that technology tools and relocation are really for lump sum populations. What do you say to that?
I think that technology is a tool that can be used in any type of policy or any kind of an environment. It's just, the technology is there to help the person through this process. So again, policy is important, but not to be confused with a lump sum or a managed cap or international assignment.
So that makes perfect sense. Because here we are. We use technology, every day, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's really who we are. I've heard Elon Musk even describe us already as cyborgs because of the amount that we're augmented by technology. Why do you think it has that reputation, Chris?
I think that the entire industry is searching how to service that lump sum population. And I think there's, a lot of discussions around, does lump sum mean low service? Does it mean it's a one-time payment? And then you're really creating a marketplace just for people to go shop. That's certainly one of the tools that are available out there. But we look at technology of how do we facilitate the entire process? So, does a human being have to look at an expense report? Does it have to then go through an entire audit process? Does a counselor have to communicate only through email or through a telephone call? Those are things that we look at and say, how do we streamline those processes? How do we get people off the phone? How do we get them out of email? How do we condense the amount of information? Because, Ben, it's interesting that you just used the iPhone. I look at that. I thought about it this morning, and I just thought, has the iPhone really made my life better? Right. And people need to ask that question, right? Ultimately, it has. I was on the bike this morning and I had music playing that, my choice of music, and that's great. But when you think about how consumed we are with this electronic device, is it really that much better? So what we've tried to do is realize that everybody going through a relocation is getting bombarded in so many different ways. How do we take all of that and streamline it to where it becomes truly an effective communication tool? And then how does it work for the transferee, right? So how does it make decisions for them, move timelines along, and those things? That's really where the technology comes into play.
You talk about the iPhone. It hasn't made us, is it better net, right? And I get those every week. I get the report. Your screen time is up. Your screen time is down. Your average screen time is 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. It's like, it's insane. Right? It's an insane amount of time. It's scary. Let me ask you in terms of mobile. I've read somewhere 5 years ago that if your strategy wasn't mobile first, you were going to lose. What is your thought on how relocation? I want to challenge you to be maybe a little specific and give us a couple tips here. Okay. I think this is a space that you really live in. What is a way that we can really leverage the mobile device, the smartphone, from a service delivery standpoint? How do you see it best being used?
The first thing, a little bit, just about Mobility Empowered. So there's two partners with the company. One is Alan Ruth. He's our chief architect designer. He's the genius behind the madness, so to speak. And then Chris Morris is our executive vice president. He's a partner as well. And he kind of is that bridge between Alan and myself when we come, I come up with a lot of stupid, crazy ideas, and then he comes up with even crazier ideas, and then somehow we figure out how to bring them to market. But something resonated with me when I worked with Alan and I was at a relocation company. We were running Assignment Pro. There was not a mobile application, so everything had to be done through a desktop. They had attempted to do a mobile wrap, but the experience wasn't very good. And I'll never forget this. He said, a mobile device is intended to be used in less than 3 minutes. So if you've got processes, if you've got things that you're trying to get accomplished on a mobile phone, it's going to take longer than 3 minutes, you probably have a problem right away. right? And then the other part is just the design. A lot of people try to take a desktop version of something, condense it into a mobile application, and they don't really give thought to, you're not using a keyboard, you're not in front of a monitor.
Yes, right. I know exactly what you're talking about, because they'll say, oh, our website is mobile responsive, meaning
Right.
it like shrinks down and configures.
Mm-hmm.
But is what you're asking me to do on that site conducive to your point, 3 minutes or less? I might look at it the other way too and say, any process you have that is 3 minutes or less, maybe you should expect someone to do it mobile first.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. We got people checking in. I'd love to hear your thoughts out there. I'd love to hear your comments. What questions do you have for Chris about how we use technology to deliver service, where you're seeing things going? What are some of the downsides? I know people out there have questions and concerns about it. I'd love to know what you think. Janina checking in with a super off base comment here. The best barbecue is in South Brazil. I mean,
we're going international now, Ben. I
think that's, I don't know what to say to that, honestly. Can we block Janina? I don't know what's going on here. Janina, I'll be the judge of that. I'll come down there and we'll see. We'll see what's up. Rick, hey, Chris, anyone else in this meeting ever move you?
Yeah. Shout out to Rick and shout out to all of Armstrong. I've actually moved 13 times in my career. Armstrong has handled 6 of those moves. And what's interesting is 4 of those, I was not working for Primacy. I was working for another corporate client. In fact, my first full relocation was with a company called Northern Telecom, and Armstrong was the mover. And they moved me from Atlanta to San Diego, and then they moved me from San Diego to Hawaii, and then they moved me from Hawaii to Houston. So Armstrong handled all 3 of those relos.
Wow. And so you've let's take a moment just to talk about your background, because we were talking the other day and I knew you had some serious chops, but I don't think I even understood, your background. So for the benefit of people maybe who don't know you that well, tell us a little bit about your relocation journey.
Yeah, so I've relocated 13 times, and those would be 13 interstate moves. So there have been local moves and things mixed in throughout my career. But I've been through every phase of my life involved in relocation. So I graduated from high school. I moved with the military. I went into basic training. Then I went to school. I got my first corporate job, and there was a relocation involved, and that would have been to San Diego. That happened when I was a newlywed. So here's a graduation relo. Here's a newlywed relo. Then I moved to Houston, and my next move is moving from Houston to Dallas. My wife is 9 months pregnant. So now I'm moving with where we're about to start a family. So interesting when we talk about, challenges and opportunities in the moving business, the mover showed up, and this was not Armstrong. The mover showed up, and it was a driver and a helper. And the driver was talking to me at the door, and then the helper comes out of the truck. It's his girlfriend, who is also 9 months pregnant. So she comes to the front door. My wife is in horror. She looks at this, and they're both as big as each other, right? They're both about ready to give birth. And I just looked at the driver and I said, we're not moving today. Sorry, it's not going to happen. Now, again, he brought me out to the truck. We opened the back of the truck. There also were no pads on the truck at all. So, so that was one of those unique experiences that were out there, and they recovered the next day. They had a much better crew and a much better situation. But yeah, so while I was going to school, I worked in the moving business. I worked in the summers. I worked on the trucks, on office moves and those types of things. And then the way I got into this industry is that I was with Northern Telecom. I was doing field service. My father-in-law was a general manager for an Atlantic agent down in Houston, and we're home for Christmas. And, I was going to go from Hawaii, and my next job, I'm dating myself now. My next job was going to be to run the project for the '88 Olympics in Seoul. Northern Telecom had the telecommunications project, and that was where I was going to go. My wife had no ambitions of going internationally unless it was somewhere tropical and, that you could get Mai Tais very easily. The idea of going to South Korea was not on her top list. And then she had reminded me as well, the only reason that I ever got into the technology side was I wanted to sell computers. I didn't want to make computers. So, or work on computers. So, home for Christmas, my father-in-law, which was a North American agent, Ben, you got a history with North American high value products division, moving equipment.
STI
logistics.
Probably.
Yep, absolutely. And that was, he said, you can come here, you can get into sales. So this is what I got to tell my friends. So I'm with Northern Telecom. I'm living in Hawaii. I'm a field engineer, and now I'm going to move to Houston, and I'm going to go to work for a moving company. And oh, by the way, I'm going to do all of this for about a third of the pay, because the pay that I was making over there, as you know, when you become a commission salesperson, your money goes down quite a bit until you start making more money. So that's how I got into the moving business.
I'm sorry, and maybe you said it and I missed it through all the hubbub there, but why in the hell did you go into the moving business again?
It was, I was probably 20 years before the right time. But when you think about what
That's a
logistics are,
long time before the right
yeah,
time, too.
yeah. When you think about logistics today and all the successful companies, this was just starting. So when I was at Northern Telecom, I would be at the site, and the first thing was to go ahead and handle the install. So the projects we worked on was basically taking long distance from an analog process to digital. And this was starting in 87, 88. You just started to have the first digital switches. Now this is what really led to where we're at today, right? It led for that whole evolution of telecommunications. So, I liked it. It was a good job. It was a good opportunity. But in order for me to move into a sales career, I was probably looking at 5 to 10 years for that. I had to go to a project, had to be in a project like that for a couple of years. Then I became a sales engineer. Then eventually I might get the opportunity to be a salesperson. So it was a long track. And my father-in-law says you could get in it now. And again, I had worked with the movers and handling the products, receiving the products, all that. So it's kind of a natural for me. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you get into the moving business, but you don't stay there too long. What was the next step for you?
So I'm focused on primarily logistics, shipments, equipment, and then I'm dealing with some very large companies and manufacturers. And then they started blending the contract. So we want you to work with the logistics, but also we want you to move our people. So, I never really thought I was going to get in the people moving business. But, again, when you have a large client, you're going to get engaged on those, especially as a commission salesperson, right? So I started to get in that, and I actually gravitated more towards that. And, my business kind of took off. But then, now we're getting into the early 90s, and I learned very quickly that you don't sell household goods just as a mover. You sell household goods as a relocation company. That's really where you want to go. So that's where I was living in Dallas at the time. My family was all in the Southeast. There was an opening in Atlanta for a regional manager for Armstrong at the time. So went to work for Armstrong. Primacy was just getting started. It wasn't even their name then. It was Armstrong Relocation, but that concept was just starting. And for me, it was logistics instead of for equipment. It was logistics for people. And I really liked that opportunity. I kind of gravitated to it. And the opportunity in that role was to really work with the product development and then also work with the sales organization.
And then so that was really interesting that you realized early that, and even back in the 90s as a mover, you had trouble selling just moving services into, let's say, HR organizations or companies, because even back then they were buying bundled. They were buying it as a relocation bundled purchase. Wow.
That's exactly right.
So, I mean, see, I had that same epiphany in 2010, and I thought I was onto something, but no, I mean, it's been happening for 30 years that RMCs have really dominated the purchasing of household goods. Interesting. So then what made you switch over kind of full on into relo per se from the moving side?
It really had the success was just the success of Primacy. I mean, we started out, we were very small. I'll never forget our first major client was American General out of Houston. And I'll never forget the RFP. The RFP said, how many clients do you have that move over 500 people per year? We looked at that question and said, we don't even move 500 people per year through the relocation concept. So how are we going to answer this? Luckily, we were able to say through the Armstrong organization, we moved, over 10,000 people. So we were able to kind of get in there, and they were one of those kind of organizations that said, we're looking for the right fit. And then they got to know us a little bit, got to know the culture, and they were fine with us being more of a boutique at that point. But really what drove it was the success of that brand. I mean, that brand went from nowhere to, I think, I left in 2004, and we were arguably either number 3 or 4 in the space at that time. So it just grew. It became Primacy. It separated from Armstrong into its own business, owned by the same people, but into a separate business. And it was just the success of that. And once you make that step, it became my passion. And I was, again, that I was hooked.
So then you worked for a few different relocation companies, really kind of working your way up, honing your skills, obviously, building your network, continue to understand the business. At what point did you say, you know what, I want to go do something radically different, utilizing technology? What made you make that jump? I'm always fascinated by that moment that an entrepreneur says, I'm going to do it.
I wish I could say that, this light bulb went off in the middle of the night and I said, wow, this is a great idea. Let's go do it. It actually was the opposite of that, because there was so much success within my career of these companies growing. It was a very comfortable situation. There was never anything that happened that said, this is an event that you need to think about being your own person.
It's hard to leave, right?
You're
it's not like you don't have any other options. I mean, you're making a really good paycheck. Your family's comfortable. You got benefits. You have status. You're somebody. You go to ERC,
Right.
people, want to buy you a drink. And then, it's a tough thing to do, to jump out of the plane like that.
Absolutely. So along the way, I went to work for Grable, and what was a defining moment was I had gotten to know Alan very well. I was head of business development. Alan was head of IT, and it was it was a partnership in these presentations and these workshops, to where we would go in and talk to client about their processes and all of that. And Alan could take systems that were currently on the market, and he could modify them. He could do things with them. To, like, as an example, there was a large investment company that wanted to create a website where an employee essentially would log in and decide, am I going to move? Am I going to leave the company? Or am I going to take a transportation subsidy? And they could do all of this within some portal that he designed and built himself. And there were 2,500 families that went through that and made that decision. So, and then depending on their decision, it would do whatever. But Alan and I were working with Amazon, and we had the opportunity to meet with them, and they've never been short on ideas and different things. And this was 2007. At this point, they were just selling books. I don't think Kindle was even out there, but they shared some ideas about a marketplace and how, getting sellers and buyers together using technology and then supporting it would really be kind of a cool idea. And that, that wasn't the creation of Mobility Empowered, but it started the foundation of starting to think about, is there a different way to do relocation? Is there a different process that we should look at? And we were successful. We ended up getting the Amazon account at Grable, and then Alan built an entire outside portal so that it made the system that they were using much better. Fast forward, we had kind of come up with the concept. We came up with the name Mobility Empowered. For the next 8 or 9 years, we shopped at different relocation companies, talked to owners, talked to some boards, and said, this is the concept. We think this is where the industry is going, and we didn't have any takers. Then in 2005, I was at Bristol, and I was working with them in developing their brand. And then Alan was working with me as a consultant, where there were certain things, and Jody's on the phone. Jody was one of those perfect test clients that would work with us on certain things to just say, hey, let's try it. Let's see if it works, even though it didn't exist at that point. And we needed to create a workflow because they had a type of policy that was a little bit different in the marketplace. So we were again using a normal, everybody would know the system. I don't want to mention it, but it's one of the main systems that are out there. Alan built an entire, again, a front end so that we could help facilitate that. He also helped me build a mobile app, because at the time, this particular provider did not have a mobile application. So he built a mobile app that would then integrate directly with this management system. So that's kind of how we got started. While we're at Bristol, Chris Morris, who as I mentioned, is our executive vice president, made a cold call. Got a hold of a company based out of New Jersey and worldwide locations, and they move about 30,000 people a year. And we started talking to them, and believe it or not, Ben, this is what's interesting, is it started off as a household good discussion. They were going to look. Household goods were the only things that they had contracted in-house. Everything else they did through manual forms and through different places around the world. So we started there, and they started talking about what they wanted. And it was like hand in glove with the concept of Mobility Empowered. So what we basically said to them is that if, we get it, we can build this. If you'll allow us to build this, and if you'll agree to work with us, give us a contract, we'll build this thing. So we did. So that was, the contract was signed January of 15. We took our first order in September of 16. And then fast forward, we've now had 51,000 people go through the portal in 41 different countries.
Wow. That's so, and so you were actually sitting on this idea, shopping it, talking to people about it, socializing this idea for 8 years.
Yeah.
And then you found that one client said, you know what, we're going to take the leap with you, and we're going to trust you to build it. That is so cool. And you never forget that client, do you?
Not at all.
Time.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That is fantastic. I want to know your questions for Chris. I love this story. I have so many questions of my own. We got people checking in over here, left and right. This is fantastic. Bring those questions, throw them in the comments here. We're going to ask those right now. Oh, this is great. I love these stories. This is the best part of my job. Robert Brizuela checking in from stormy Nashville. Tori Roberts from Georgia. Kathy from Connecticut. This is great. Look at Sean Keys. Look at Sean there from Pinellas County. Blast from the past. He likes to party. That's great. That's funny, Sean. I was just talking about you last week with Olivia. Worked with him at Pods down there in Clearwater over 10 years ago. Scott Williamson. What's up, Chris? It's Scott in Dallas.
Little story about Scott. His my father-in-law was a general manager in Houston, and Scott's father was the general manager in Dallas for Atlantic. So we kind of knew each other, not much older than teenagers. So again, that goes back a long time. But hi, Scott.
Wow, that's funny. I love it. It is kind of a small world,
Yeah.
isn't it? Matthew says, if memory serves me right, Chris did some good cycling on the Mont Vento.
I wouldn't call it good. I made it to the top. We'll leave it at that.
That's great. I wouldn't call it good, but you made it. Hey,
I made it.
There you go. Terry in Nashville checking in. Ray saying he can cook. We'll see. Joe's in Kansas City is the best. Burn ends, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Janet's got a softball for you. Chris, you coming to SRC conference and at the Don?
I am. Beautiful hotel. Beautiful location.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I wanted to get married at the Don Cesar. I was even willing to do it on a Thursday just to be able to do it for like 10 grand. And it didn't work out. I ended up getting married in St. Pete though at the Sunken Gardens, and it was absolutely beautiful. So can't wait to go to the Don. Elizabeth says, what was it like living in Hawaii? Did it feel like you were on a vacation?
We enjoyed our time in Hawaii, but again, coming from the U.S., growing up in the U.S., the first 6 months was paradise. The next 6 months was kind of like, we're on an island. How do we get off this island? It would be great to maybe have a fall. It'd be great maybe to get back and watch a football game or some of those things. So a lot of beauty, certainly enjoyed the time there, but we were ready to go. The other part of it is when I was there were really two categories. There were Hawaiians and there were military. There wasn't another category for that. So the Hawaiians, let's just say, were not happy about the military being there and their presence being there. So even though I have a military background, they grouped me in with the military as well. So we had to be fairly selective of where what areas of Hawaii we went to at the time.
Interesting. Matthew says technology is key to support human interaction as it relieves staff from basic admin and provides time to add value to the process through personal contact. Is he missing anything or is he spot on?
No, he's right on. I mean, when you think about the amount of humans that are involved in processing a reload today, it's astronomical. It absolutely is. And that's part of what we've looked at is, again, working with different brands and building those brands. The problem we had is as we grew and we had success, so did our infrastructure. And so it became a much bigger investment, a much bigger buildings, bigger, more people, all that kind of stuff. And, there's nothing wrong with that if that's the business you're in. But the problem is then when you start getting, peaks and valleys, when we have a peak season, then an off season, then you have economic turmoil that creates problems. And why all of a sudden that infrastructure is very expensive.
Yeah, I agree. I think Matthew's spot on too. I would go a step further and ask you, I'm a big fan of the saying, using technology to allow human beings to do human things. Mm-hmm. However, are there human things that we could also be using technology for? Is AI, are bots, are these things there yet? And do you think they'll have a place in mobility services?
Yeah, I absolutely do, because when you think about, especially for a lot of the people that are on this, I'm watching the people come through, you all travel for a living. Normally you would travel, non-pandemic, you would be on airplanes and you'd be in hotels. So you understand the beauty of being mobile and how anything that's made easier for you is better. You don't want to scroll through emails. You don't want to, listen to a voicemail. It'd be great if you just go somewhere to get your information right away because you're just on the go. You got it. You're on the run. So we approach it the same way. And yes, there is AI. There are bots that are out there. We, one of the things that we use, and we haven't really introduced her to the entire industry, but we have a bot, and her name is Kate, Relocate. And Kate can handle. Kate
I don't know why I didn't see that coming. I'm like, Kate, why Kate?
And Kate can answer a little over 1,500 questions, like when is my shipment going to deliver? Can you give me a status on my expense report? Can you answer a question? And the most important question that Kate can answer is, can I talk to a human being? So, right. So that again, yeah, absolutely. Because somebody might just need just a little piece of information, and why make them talk to an agent? Why even make them talk to a person?
No, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've relocated. I'd love the demo of Relocate. I think that's pretty cool. Let's see here. And you're right. So many. I mean, I worked for a moving company for 5 years. And I would say 80% of those questions were literally accessing the system and reading a field. Mm-hmm. What date are they coming? What date are they picking up? How many pounds was the shipment? Did it exceed policy or not? Like, I mean, it's just, yeah, I firmly agree. Leave your questions in the comments. I want to hear from you. What do you think about all this tech stuff? What do you think about the future of global mobility service delivery? Richard's got a question I think that's on everybody's mind. I guess moving people is quite a personal service, but is there a limit to digitalization of the process?
No, I think we're on a good path. I think we're at the beginning of the journey, and I'll even use moving as an example. For those of you that have been around long enough, there was a person that went out to the house and they did a physical survey, and it was on a piece of paper. It was a triplicate. You took that estimate, you brought it back to the agency. One went into the sales folder, one went into customer service, and one went back to operations. And then I don't know what happened after there. Somewhere it ended up going with billing, and that was all manual. And then the driver showed up, and then he recreated this. And everything you just did on that survey, he just did everything again, or she did everything again when they did the inventory for the move going out. And then you had all this paperwork, and then that paperwork had to be bundled, and it had to be sent back to the agency, and the agency had to do work with it. And then sometime, maybe 10 days later, maybe 2 weeks later, the invoice actually went to the customer, and then the customer has to go through all this paper. So at best, you might get paid in 30 days. Fast forward, you do a digital survey. That survey then is uploaded. The driver uses that survey to complete the inventory. They're going through and they're acknowledging and they're doing the condition report. This was amazing. When I moved to Florida, this was all done on an iPad. And at the end of the move, the driver says, here's your inventory. And I'm going through the inventory. And then he says, sign here, sign. And then it's like, okay, it's going to be billed now. It's done. That's it.
Yeah. Chris, would it shock you to know that there are still moving companies with triplicate, with triplicate bills of lading, with triplicate, inventories, with the white sheet, the yellow sheet, the pink sheet? Mm-hmm. This stuff still goes on today. I worked in an office where there were 2 typewriters, there were 2 word processors where you fed these things through these bills of lading so they could. This is still now it's been decreasing quickly as major van lines have been adopting technology. There were early adopters, and now there's the laggards are getting into the mix. But there's still some independents that are running, with these Milburn printing forms. Wild stuff.
And not to pick on the movers, but those same people that are following those processes are probably trying to figure out how to text using a rotary phone right now. So they got a ways to go.
No comment. Elizabeth, the good old Grable days. It was fun working with you. Awesome.
You as well.
Yeah, leave your questions for Chris here. Robert says, what kind of reaction did you receive from corporate clients when they saw such a great technology solution back then?
I think it was, the first client, and this is the thing, and it makes it really difficult from a branding perspective of how do we position Mobility Empowered? Do we position ourselves as a service company, or do we position ourselves as a technology company? And really, we position ourselves as a solutions company, because that client, they knew that we were going to develop technology to handle their workflow and to transform the whole experience. But we didn't have very many conversations about, what's it built on, and what are your developers doing, or whatever. All they wanted to see was the finished product. Right? They wanted to know that somebody could do, there were 5 steps that somebody needed to do on their relocation, and they wanted to make sure that was done. So yeah, we use technology to support the transformation, but it was really the client that said, I'll never forget this, when we were putting together the SLAs, the client said, anytime anybody from Mobility Empowered has to talk to one of our transferees on the phone, that's a service failure. And her point wasn't so much a measurement of us, it was also a measurement of their own people. Because the idea is we want them to facilitate everything, but we made sure we had phone support, right, in case you had problems or whatever. But they wanted to track those, and they wanted to focus on those, because again, they might determine the root cause and then get away from why those things are occurring. But yeah, the first time I've ever had a customer say that we're going to track phone calls as a service failure.
It's funny you say that. I was literally sitting in the office of the CEO of a relocation company this week, and he said, you see that thing over there? And he pointed to his desk phone, which I had a thin layer of dust on it. Right. Pointed to his desk phone. It said, I grew up in this business on that thing right there. Mm-hmm. And now if someone has to use this thing to call me, it's a service failure.
Right.
For them. It's a dissatisfier for them. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Let's see here. We've got some other questions. Keep these questions coming. I love these questions. Your questions are always better than my questions. Scott Williamson, Chris, I remember first meeting you at Lake Conroe poker and golf trip on our first Dallas Atlantic group. Met up with your Houston Atlantic group back in the early 90s. That sounds like fun.
Oh, it's an
Poker
awesome
and golf
trip.
trips.
Yeah, and
Where
if
did those go?
Oh yeah, if anybody's ever heard of April Sound or been to that area of Lake Conroe, just a beautiful secret. I mean, the hill country in Texas. We were there in the fall. The colors were all changing. Weather was perfect, and exactly what Scott said. We golfed there in the day and we played poker at night. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, sounds amazing. Kathy's got a question here. Chris, did you see your business growing over the last 12 months?
No, actually, we saw it doing the opposite. About 65% of our business is global in nature. So with borders closed, there's no real use to do our business. March of last year was not March. I'm sorry. May of last year was probably the bottom. And we've seen we're probably at 50% of where we were in February of 19. So we do see it going up. But again, it's going to be dependent on borders opening back up again.
And that's due to your business mix.
Yep.
Right, is what you're saying. You know, it's funny. I was talking to an RMC leader today, and they were saying, you know, business is booming. It's gangbusters. I was like, that's really interesting, because I talked to some people and they say, really not until 2022 are we going to see it all the way back. And I think it has so much to do with what you just said, business mix. You know, the RMC that said it was booming, and they're 80-90% domestic, right? So they're back with a vengeance, right? All that pent up demand's releasing, right? Whereas on the international side, it's still kind of pent up.
Yeah, and you know, we service. When you think about the, you know, in a normal year, we'll move 3,000 to 4,000 people from India into the U.S. Well, I think just a month ago, we just started having flights again, from direct flights from India into the United States. So, you know, companies are still grappling. And the biggest headwind that we see is that a lot of our clients support the Fortune 500. So if those people aren't back at work, there's no need to bring the support in to go back to those offices. So they're holding back, they're keeping them on the bench. And then once those offices open back up, that's where we're planning a tremendous. I mean, as an example, I think we have something like over 2,000 open recs that have been filled, new campus hires that are waiting for their location.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, and I wonder if they're all going to come at September 1, October 1, November. You wonder what's that delivery pattern going to look like when it comes to you, because it could really create. Now, maybe not so much. Let me ask you. This is a good question, actually.
I know where you're going with this, and this is a great question. I had it yesterday.
Because I'll be honest, I used to run call centers. I've run sales organizations, service organizations, and we always look at that delivery curve, right? And say, okay, what time of day, what day of month, what month of year is the business coming? Let's staff up. What's our capacity plan, our cap plan? How do we plan for this? Does it affect you the same way as a digitized service delivery model?
It really doesn't impact us, because if the client believes in the process and they use the technology, we're communicating with the employee in many cases before they're even an employee, right? So again, mobility is a big part of what we do, but 35% of the people that we touch never relocate, right? They're joining a project, they're an intern, they're a college new hire, they're not moving. But the client is using us to onboard that talent. They're using us to get them into the company.
I'm really confused. So 35% of the people you touch aren't relocating.
Correct.
Why do you touch them?
Because what we've learned with these customers is that if you're an intern, if you're a contractor, if you're maybe a campus new hire, there's not a robust experience to get you onboarded. It's going to be through emails. You might at some point you might get into the company system, but that's when you become an employee. So when you think about everything that happens to these people before they actually get on the ground, that's where we've looked at that and said, we've got to develop tools to help with that. So our lead time is much better. The other thing is remember that we only communicate when the transferee wants to talk to us, right? So in a normal model, everybody gets a phone call. So those 2,000 come through this week. I've got to make 2,000 phone calls like now, right? Because that would be in an SLA. But because of the way that we work with this, a lot of that conversation is happening through the technology. So we're learning about the person, we're looking what they're doing, and really we're in more of a problem solving role through that live chat center. And then also all of that information that I said that the bot can answer, we're collecting that all as part of the process, working with the supply chain.
That you bring up a great point, because in peak season, what'll happen is these problems will start compounding, right?
Right.
And there's this tsunami of demand, right? And what'll happen is, and I'll just talk about from the moving side, but I'm sure it happens with every single, real estate, corporate housing, et cetera. you get all these files start coming in, and one day there's 10 a day, and the next day there's 20 a day, and then one day there's 50 a day, and then it just gets really crazy, right? And you have the same amount of people, and maybe you have an intern or a helper, right? And it just gets crazy, and then files start backing up, and then because the person has to call them, they have to register it, right, and put the data in there with the notes on the file, and then it usually goes over to this other part of the organization that has to plan it somehow, right? And so there's just becomes this backlog. And I think that that is huge. And then what happens? The moving company doesn't know how many orders they really have because they're still sitting in a queue somewhere or sitting in paper files on people's desks somewhere. And then by the time they know how many moves they've accepted and they shut it down, it's too late. They've already taken more than they can handle. This is really fascinating. I love this. And I could go on and on with this, but we have questions coming in here. People want to talk, and I want to prioritize that. We're going to get to everybody's questions. Keep those questions coming. Hit that like button. I love these questions. Kathy, Jack, good afternoon. Afternoon, Captain Jack. Carolyn, hi from Detroit. What's up, Carolyn? Good to see you. Carolyn's a good friend there. Carolyn, now the Rocket Mortgage Party on Wednesdays is going to be amazing at ERC. Shannon Barnes, what do you think is the most unique thing about your technology compared to other technology out there?
Probably the biggest single component is that we're one of the few organizations that actually use our own technology and provide a service. So the technology has been built to facilitate the different services that we provide for a corporate client, but it also has built in, again, the live chat, the communication, the billing, the auditing, the contracting. It's all built into the technology, where there's some fantastic technology that's out there, but it's somebody else's technology. So that was when we looked at doing this all along. Both Al and I and Chris had conversations around, do we take something off the shelf and build the front end? What do we do? And it was, no, there's nothing out there that we really is going to do it the way that we want to do it. So let's start from scratch.
It's interesting when you say start from scratch. So my philosophy on this, nobody asked me, but my philosophy on this is tech is good. And there are a lot of tech tools that are off the shelf that are just things that exist in our day-to-day. We're talking about Slack. Right. We're talking about, Zoom, Teams. There's things that exist nowadays that you can get off the shelf that are amazing. What I think is under talked about, is that a thing? Underrepresented, whatever. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Is new processes, creating new processes, and using tech to empower that and to automate some of that stuff, but just doing things in a different way. And so I would encourage anybody out there to start thinking in terms of different processes and doing things differently, and then just how does tech empower that? Because creating tech for tech's sake is definitely not the way to win.
And Ben, for those of your audience that's old enough will remember what it was like to deal with an airline ticket. You got on the phone, your telephone, your rotary phone, you called the travel agent, you said, okay, I'm making a trip. Can you walk me through what my options are? And then they've got their computer and you can hear the keys ticking, and they would come back and say, here's your flight. Yep, that's what I want. They would then book the ticket. They would print out a paper ticket. That paper ticket would then be sent to your house. If it was last minute, it'd be couriered or be mailed to you, and you have your tickets. You would then take those tickets. You would go to the airport and you would have to check in with those tickets, and then they would give you a boarding pass. And then with that boarding pass, you could go into the boarding area. So if you had any changes, if there were any issues, it was all happening real time. Right now, from my mobile app, I can book a flight anywhere in the world, and it's probably a 2-minute event. Right. Mm-hmm. I go in there, I see my flight options. It's already got my credit card, all the information. I book it. I now have my acknowledgement. When it's time to check in, you check in from your phone, you get your boarding pass, and away you go.
Yep. You're totally right. 100%. That's so great. Martin's got a question. Martin says, what advice do you have for a young up-and-comer in household goods?
Buy some trucks, man. Now's the time. It's truly, Marty, I've never seen in my entire career where the moving industry is finally getting the recognition that it deserves. And what I mean by that is you talk to customers about the moving, and you have a little bit of conversation about, the quality and what you do and the training and all of that. And then it goes to, okay, and then what's your discount? And what are you going to be willing to waive? And what are you going to be willing to do for this? And it really was turned into a commodity very quickly. And it's nice to see that organizations are now beginning to realize that this isn't a commodity. This is an area, until we have actual robots. This is one part of the business that can't be replaced by technology, right? Somebody's got to load that furniture. Somebody's got to take care of it. And somebody, again, there'll be a time when somebody won't be driving a truck and it'll be a computer. But, I don't think we're anywhere close to where a machine is actually going to load the furniture.
Yeah, exactly. Load the furniture. I mean, you might even get to autonomous trucks in the next 5 years, right. But I mean, the robots to load furniture, that's going to be down the road. Now I'm gonna twist this and challenge you, Chris, again. Martin is on the sales side. Mm-hmm. He's not on the ops side. Yeah, he could go out and buy a truck, but he's probably not going to be the one driving it.
Right.
What is a piece of practical advice you'd have for a young, up and coming sales biz dev person in household goods?
In any business, and I'll remember this early on in my career. God gave you two of these and one of these. Mm-hmm. The biggest mistake that salespeople have is they don't listen enough. The client normally is going to tell them what they need and what they want and when they want it. It's just a matter of listening to them. So that's the biggest piece of advice, is listen to what your customers or your prospects are saying, and then work really hard to give them that.
Interesting. Cool, Martin. Go get him, Marty. Martin worked with me for a few years, so there you go. Jamie Massler. Hi, Ben and Chris, checking in from rainy Mississippi. All right, Jamie, stay dry, buddy. Deborah Burton, love relocate. Joe Hargis says Martin may outlive in my shadow for 5 years and learn. That's great. Martin, is that your boss? That's funny. Jack Jampel, in reality, currently household goods partner has to call an employee every day with an update. How does your bot handle that, since date is never final, especially during today's times?
So there's multiple ways that we can engage with a supplier. Where we're doing a lot of volume, we have APIs built with the supplier. So some of the partners that we work with, again, if we use technology, we're getting that information fed through us through an API. The other way is kind of a little bit manual, and that is they're updating the system on where they're going. The other thing that we really try to do with our customers and working with them is determining what is the best way to actually facilitate that shipment. Right. And again, I'm not splitting atoms here. I'm not right. This isn't rocket science, but I'm not going to give a 2,500 pound shipment that's probably going to go into storage to a van line. It shouldn't go into a van. It should go into a box. The box can be picked up on a certain day. It can be delivered on a day, and what happens in between doesn't really matter. So Jack, to your point, you see a lot of variations with some of the dates out there, but again, that's working very closely with our supply chain to try to narrow those things down, and then trying to get the right shipments. That was something that frustrated me when I was on the moving side, and I dealt with some of the larger RMCs. And I'm in Houston. I'm with the largest North American agent at the time. Atlantic was the largest, and this is our footprint. And sure enough, they would give me a move from the middle of nowhere to the middle of nowhere that I don't have a truck for. So, I would always look at it and say, why are you calling me on June 28th? A shipment going from Montana to Idaho. This is where we're located at. So that's the other thing. We try to work with suppliers within the supply chain of, where can they work with? And I don't want this to sound like an infomercial from Armstrong or from some of our partners, but, we have some really, really good dedicated move partners that have absolutely stepped up this summer. It's interesting as I've had friends reach out to me and say, the mover stood me up. I'm stranded. What do I do? Whatever. And, I had 3 of those this summer, and I was able to reach out to specifically Walkboard and reach out to Armstrong and get those moves covered. And they're a big part of our supply chain, and they've really stepped up. They've, I don't know how they do it, but they've done it.
Yeah, really interesting. Jack, I would say that I don't know about a bot, but I think that we really should be at the place where you're getting text notifications. Yep. So if you have a date scheduled, you get a text. If the date changes, you get a text message. If you want to change the date, you can respond to the text message and reply. I think that 80% of that date stuff should be done via text message. I know when I was at Pods back in the day, and this was probably back in 2000, that was 10 years ago, they were texting people with the ETAs. Right. And they were texting them down to the hour range, actually down to the minute with the 3 hour range. So, I think we need to get there. I think the hardest part with that is how fragmented the moving business is. I mean, yes, you have let's say 5 major van lines, but
Mhm.
within that you have about 3, 4, 5,000 different moving agents that are touching this stuff. And unfortunately, RMCs don't have APIs into the systems of these moving companies so that they're actually, reading real-time data, and data is getting fed back and forth. Chris, have you seen APIs of that level of sophistication that could provide that kind of experience?
Yeah, we're doing it in 2 areas right now. One, we're doing it in the travel side of the business, and then we're also doing it on the automobile shipping.
Right. And automobile shipping makes sense because that's a freight carrier and they have
Mhm.
much more sophisticated technology because they, yes, that makes a ton of sense. And then of course travel. I mean, yeah, travel, right? I mean, travel is
Mhm.
very sophisticated. So yeah, Jack, I mean, I think that we should be there already. We're not there. Since 90% of corporate moves are probably handled by 3 different entities, it shouldn't be as hard as it is. I see a real lack of investment around APIs and automations and integrations on the back end that can make RMCs both more efficient, but also give that customer experience that customers expect. Do you see that changing, Chris? I mean, what do you think about the lack of integration and automation on the back end? We see a lot of investment in front end tech because
Mhm.
tech is sexy, it sells, it's the sizzle. But what about the steak? What about the back end product?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at some of the agents that we work with, and again, we're not doing APIs with the van lines. We're doing this at the agent level with those agents that have that level of sophistication, because again, they are dispatching their orders. They're in direct control of these things. And to Jack's point is, you don't want people calling constantly or somebody looking for their shipment. So what we do today is that we look for those updates. Give us an update of what's going on, and instead of texting them, it's actually in their mobile app. They can go to their mobile app and they can click moving, and it's going to pull up all the details on their move. If there's an alert, they're going to get alert through the mobile app. So it's not necessarily a text. And that's
Yeah,
where the communication
and
really
you're
comes in.
right.
Yep.
And you're right. But a lot of that is kind of mechanical Turk processes where the moving company has to then
Hmm.
go in and enter it into a portal so that it's there. And I tell you what, honestly, from a moving company standpoint, we would love when we sign a new RMC, but then we'd hate when we do the demo of their portal.
Right.
And we're like, okay, here's another password, another login. Okay, Susie has to know it. Rebecca has to know it, and Steve has to know it, because God forbid Susie's out one day. And then you have to go in, and God forbid you don't update the date or the whatever, then the RMC's calling you like you just kicked a dog or something somewhere. And so it's like, it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of human beings doing extra stuff for the
Hmm.
appearance of automation on behalf of the, for the customer, and how often do transfers actually use that functionality. So I would love to see, and this is really me just going on a rant. People have heard this before, they watch the show. I would love to see more of an investment around APIs, integrations, and back end work to really allow the human beings to do human things. Let's see what other people have to say about it. If you have a comment, let me know. Put it in the comments here. Ray Abbott says, I agree with you, Ben. Texting is a big must moving forward. Yeah, 100%. Jack says, agree totally, Ben. Text is fine, but my point, it's a person. Well, it's not always a person. I mean, if that field is updated in real time, and it will be on the moving side, the movers have that field updated 100% because they need to know when the truck's going to be there.
And
It's just
that's
the
where,
RMC doesn't have that information.
well, we do with our agents. So that's the important part is, first of all, you need to work with an agency that has that type of control and have that type of sophistication from a technology standpoint. Then that allows us to create an API with that partner. So we're tapping directly in. When we need that information, we're going through an API and we're pulling it. So the best way, this is a very non-technical description, but the API gives us the ability to reach right into their dispatch system and get those details.
Yeah.
Or for them to push it out when there is an update.
Yeah. Vinny Valverde checking in a little late, but I'm here now. Thanks, Vinny. Better late than never. Never
Vinny?
late is better, Drake. Jay Champel, with all due respect, airline tickets and buying products off Amazon is much different than moving a human being and their family.
You're right. I guess if getting a better price, having more selection, being able to get things when I need it is a bad thing, I guess that would be the case, or having to chase information and again, this is one of the areas that I think is a lot of confusion around the technology. Technology is not a replacement for the human touch. Why do I have to call somebody to get a moving date? Why do I have to call somebody to get an update on my expense report? right? I don't do that. Why, do I need somebody to go through a community guide on the phone with me, or can they actually present that information to me in an easy to read format, and I can read it at my convenience? I mean, those are the areas where, again, that it doesn't take away from oversight. It doesn't take away from that client that, and let me back up. I'll be honest with you. If I'm going through a relocation, I'm probably, and I'm with an employer, we offer different levels. First level is it's live chat. You work on it's, you're empowered to handle your own relocation. The next one is that level. Plus we do some type of outreach by text or phone. Hey, Ben, congratulations on your relocation. I see you logged in. Looks like you got everything set up. Just wanted to check in with you. And if there's anything, this is how to get a hold of me. And then the third level is what we call the concierge. And that's for that person that's moving, that says, I'm not going to log into a system. I'm not going to do any of my own stuff. I'm not even going to submit my own expense reports. That's where we assign a concierge to it. And that's your traditional model. So we give those options that are there, but I'll be honest with you, we're doing a group move right now out of California to South Florida. And the chief people officer went through this process, and she's moved multiple times. And she just said that it's never been easier. So again, but that's not to say one size fits all. Cause like I said, if it was me, I'd pay the extra money and have somebody take care of all those details for me. I would probably never log in.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. I would agree with you. Let's see what Jill says. Ben, I completely agree. A lot of manual input to get the look of automation when using multiple systems. Yeah, Jill, for sure. Robert saying, great point, Ben. Chris, can you speak to the multitude of systems in the employee and HR lifecycle, including HRIS system, that's human resource information systems, that needs to be considered in making the mobility experience better? That's true. I mean, we're just talking in our kind of industry and ecosystem of mobility, but we're forgetting how we integrate with the client. What are your thoughts?
If I look at a mobility program and maybe I would consider it dysfunctional. And what I mean by that is the transferees come in too late. Everything's last minute. There were services that were available to them. So again, if there's RMCs that are on and you're involved in the home sale programs, there's nothing worse than they've already listed their house, or they've already set up with a realtor. And, Carolyn, you're on with this with Rocket, and they've already started talking to a lender. So that makes everybody's job that much more difficult and makes it that much more expensive. So what causes that problem? Well, a lot of people have focused on, we'll just put in the policy. The policy says, don't list your home and don't do this and don't do that. But the problem is the first thing a person is going to do when they're looking for a job is talk to a realtor before they even know for certain that they're going to take that job, because they want to know, can I sell my house? They're going to go to Google and they're going to start doing a search. They're going to go to realtor.com, and then they're going to have realtors reach out to them.
What's my estimate? How much money are we going to make?
Exactly. And then they're going to go, you know what, how much can I borrow? And what can I do with this? And that all happens. So what we're looking to do, and this is a great point, Robert, when you look at HRIS systems, we're looking to back that up. We're looking to bring that before they actually come on board, right? And that's where, again, the onboarding process, integrating that with the entire relocation through one seamless process is really where we think you can enhance that, because we're getting people when they're in the recruiting stage. We're getting people and we're able to communicate to them. As an example, employees or a candidate A is they live in Florida, they're getting a job in Phoenix. Before they even go on that trip, they're going to be online. They're going to be looking at schools. If they have kids, they're going to be doing all of that. And who knows what information they're getting. So wouldn't it be great if they can get into a portal that already has all that information for them, and they can they can ask questions throughout the entire process? That's where I see this thing really going. And that's where, again, working with there's some tremendous HRI systems out there and recruiting tools, but they're really focused on the internal process, not so much on that candidate and that employee. And imagine, and I'll ask everybody, and I'd love your feedback through LinkedIn after we're done here, because this could be a whole topic, but I would love your feedback on, what was your experience like when you joined the company you're currently with? What was that experience like, if you remember it? Was it a lot of emails? Was it a lot of independent forms? Was it a lot of phone calls? How did you feel about the company, and what did you learn about the company other than what you did on your own search of the company? So, imagine, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. We got a couple of comments regarding that. And Vinny actually just joined the company. So Vinny says technology should enhance the experience and not replace the consultant's job. Also, it really depends on the industry, culture of the company, and the employee/family, how they want to be engaged. Jack agrees with Vinny. Let's see here. We also have a question around We also have a question around the onboarding process or comment here. Robert, onboarding sounds like a great way to offset the decline of reload volume. It really helps HR do what they can't always get into. On this show, we always talk about, reload, where is it going? And if it's not going our way, what's next? And it sounds like onboarding is a kind of a neat little vertical to get into, whether or not it's a value add or a whole nother kind of revenue model. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about the strategic opportunity of onboarding?
So I'm going to ask a question first for the audience. If you look at calendar year 19 to 20, what's the guess on how many people moved in America? And then the second part of that question is how many
comparing 19's volume.
Yeah, I think it would probably be like the first quarter of 19 to the first quarter of 20. So pre-pandemic. So if you look at that period of time, and again, anything that you look at after the pandemic started you can't ascertain anything from that. It's right. I live in Florida and our real estate prices for rental properties have gone through the roof. Well, because everybody came to Florida during the pandemic, that's not going to be duplicated when people go back to work and go back to school, but anytime soon. But my question is, any guesses? Can anybody post anything in there? What they think? How many people moved within the United States in any 12-month period? And then how many of those moved for a job?
What percentage of those were for a job?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. So I'm gonna venture kind of some thoughts on this because I've thought about this before, not very intelligently, but you're talking about long distance moves.
Yep.
Like more than 50 miles or whatever.
Right.
I would say interstate. I would say interstate moves would probably be around. I would say, gosh, close to 1 million. I'd say close to 1 million, and I'd say of those for a job that were like employee sponsored versus like self-initiated for whatever reason, I would say probably a third to a half.
So if anybody's really bored and you have nothing to read, go look at the census report that just came out. There's some really good data in there. And one of the data elements that are in there is the number of people that moved within the US as part of that data. So I looked at the last year of this and it just coincided with, it was pre-pandemic. There were 34 million people that moved in the US in that year. 34 million. Of that 34 million, 3.5 million cited a job transfer as the reason for the relocation. So there's 3.5 million. So, and again, this is because I know one of the questions is where's our industry going with virtual work and all that kind of stuff. So follow me on these numbers. If there were roughly 3.5 million people that moved for their job, and if we use ERC data and averages and everything that goes with it, that works out to about $120 billion spend. Okay. Now cut that in half, do whatever you want to with it. But if you just take it down to 100 billion, okay, this would be your real estate, mortgage, moving, corporate apartments, gross up would be included in that number too, because that's in the ERC average. When you look at that now, and this, I love your feedback, and I not for today, but I'd love this on LinkedIn, is because I've been trying to get to the number of what do relocation management companies actually process? Like what do they go with? So some of the public companies, you can see this where you can see they did X number of relocations or whatever. My math gets it to 12 million, 12 to 14 million is what's 12 to 14 billion has actually gone through the RMCs. So take 100 billion and subtract 12 billion from that. That's 12%. Now, to me, that's 88% of the people in America that took a job transfer did not use a relocation management company using those numbers.
Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. And I mean, obviously we're making a lot of leaps here and a lot of extrapolating a lot of things, but I've also been curious about what percentage of reload volume is managed versus unmanaged. Right. And I do suspect that it's a lot more than we think. When you ask ERC, these numbers are going to say 70% of it's managed. And that's really, well, you're looking at your own membership who's savvy enough to be members of ERC, right? They're in the relocation business, right? So when you're hammer, everything's a nail, right? But when you think about how many law firms and how many hospitals and how many mom and pop shops just offer somebody $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, whatever it takes, the signing bonus to get them there. I think that immensely fragmented market in the aggregate is enormous.
Right. And that's the question. This is, again, because I put on my hat when I was just RMC, and I had to say no to more opportunities than yes, because there was a model, there was, we were built to do something a certain way, and there was a revenue expectation around that. So, I look at that 3.5 million people and say, well, and 12% of it's being serviced today. That's an incredible opportunity. And you have to ask your question, why haven't they used this type of service before? So those are the conversations we're having with a lot of clients out there, that some of their program is managed, but the other part of it's not managed at all.
Super interesting. Yeah. Jack, Jack Jampel, great example of that. Jack says there's definitely opportunities and an onboarding opportunity where certain relo sectors can adapt. Glad to discuss if anyone would like to discuss. Jack's calendar is going to get really full really quickly. So is yours, I have a feeling, Chris. Let's see here. Let's see if we have any other questions. Maybe we got time for one last question. I've been saving this one, and then we'll hop into a top 5. Scott Williamson, Chris, this may be a question for Alan, but do you see Mobility Empowered looking into the advanced digitization of blockchain technology? I'm seeing cutting edge solutions for supply chain tracking management. Chris, are you developing a Relo coin? I'm just kidding. I didn't ask that question.
But when you look at blockchain technology, it's in the lab right now. Mm-hmm. So it is something that Alan's working on.
Is it going to be blockchain that's created at the RMC level, or is it going to be utilizing the blockchain of these suppliers?
Can't tell you. I have no idea. This is one of those things that, Alan has in his head, but
Alan, where are you right now? Get on this call, answer our questions about blockchain, our crazy blockchain questions. Let's see here. One last question, because that was a short answer. One last question from Richard, if I can find it here. It's about data. He says, I guess there's a lot of personal data involved in the process. Are there any major privacy issues in holding data on people?
Yeah, and we spent a lot of time on this, but this is one of the big opportunities that we see for ourselves is when you look at companies and they're contracting direct, especially on a global basis. They might have part of their program outsourced in the US, but local HR is dealing with a DSP or they're dealing with a mover. It's entirely possible, at least what I've seen from my experience, is that they're not under contract. And one of the key pillars of data protection and GDPR is that anybody who touches that data needs to be under a contract that stipulates this is how the data is to be handled. One of the benefits of what we do and working with our clients is that we do global contract management. And that's a provision with any supplier that's working through our system we'll go through. We also have an entire cleansing process where we're only keeping information as we need it, and then it's being cleansed from the system. And
is that like cider vinegar and lemon juice? What kind of cleanser are we doing here, Chris?
It's timed. It's also we also integrate with some fintech tools. So again, things like getting banking information or routing numbers. There's no reason for us to have to store that data. So we've integrated some things that help us with that.
Wow, this has been an incredible conversation. The comments have been amazing. The questions have been amazing. Y'all do not disappoint. Thank you so much to the audience. You're amazing. Chris, you've been really open and candid. You've really allowed me to go down a lot of rabbit holes of my own curiosity. I appreciate that so much. I did want to see, I like to do top 5s.
Right.
And we've been a little short-staffed here on Love and Relo, okay? They say, the unemployment market, it's really hard to get people, good people around here. No, I'm just kidding. Everybody's got stuff to do. So anyway, we weren't able to produce it the same way, but I wanted to know, do you think you can do a top 5 off the cuff here a little bit?
Yeah, and absolutely. And I want everybody to work with me on this. This is from the eyes of the relocating employee. And all of us get caught up from time to time about that difficult assignee, that horrible shipper, that whatever. But one thing that I've learned from my relocations is that, first thing is when I'm being relocated for a job, and that job starts the day I take that job. It doesn't start the day my move is complete and the house is sold and every picture's hung and everything's put together. It starts that day. So keep in mind that most of these relos, the person that's the employee starts working day one, and now they have a second job, and that's through the relocation. So, we're seeing people in their worst, absolutely their worst. I mean, stress can't get any higher. So from my perspective, these are some points that my top 5 are things that people need to think about and remember about relocating as an individual. First thing, relocation sucks. There's no other way to say it. Number 4, relocating is not an adventure. Even when we moved to Hawaii, it was great. We're going to Hawaii, but We have to get rid of our dog or quarantine it for 6 months. I mean, this is like our child, right? You got to go through this. When we moved with Mike, when we moved to Memphis, we have a 3-year-old, and the world was going to end if that 3-year-old didn't get into the right preschool that got her into the right kindergarten, right? Those are, I mean, and you're like, it's just a 3-year-old. Why are you so tense on this? Well, in our perspective, as a grandparent now,
I'm going through this right now.
There you go. But it's the most important thing. The truck doesn't matter. And now if the truck doesn't show up, it's gas on the fire. So, but it's typically not an adventure. The other thing is relocating is inconvenient and painful. I don't care if you've got the best mobility advisor, the best counselor, the best policy, it's still going to be painful. Relocation is expensive. And, and that's part of our challenge of everybody in the supply chain and everybody that manages programs are, what are you doing to keep the cost in line? What are you doing to make it? Because what companies are going to do is they're going to make, and that's why we're seeing the lump sums. The best counter to lump sum is being able to provide clients with some type of price predictability, right? Some kind of value predictability. Why should I go through you if I can give them a lump sum and they can find it better online, right? That we think we've solved that problem, but that's a big part of it. Relocating will continue and grow. And this is the part that I've heard from a lot of folks here is, what is the future of work? What does remote working look like? For the same companies, and you know who they are, the ones that are selling you all of this technology for remote work, go look at what they're spending on construction projects for regional offices, or more, instead of headquarter dominant, they're doing regional centers. These are the very tech companies that are saying, oh, the future of work is going to be remote. No, it's not. You're going to have certain professions and jobs that are going to work that way. But I can tell you, I haven't seen my employees in Bangalore in 18 months. It's nowhere near as productive as what it would have been. And you've got people working from home. And I'll use India as an example. We've got some employees that have 4 generations under one roof. I talked to a guy this morning and he said, we have bedrooms and we have wired for these people. So that's the other thing. So the idea behind this, and you look at that, just the US market alone, and say there were 3.5 million people that moved for a job. That's a whole lot of growth. That's a whole lot of opportunity. So Ben, that's my top 5.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I think that's great. And I mean, especially when you talk about engineers, I just saw this article in the Wall Street Journal about how many engineers are starting to take 2 jobs at a time.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. And they're working from home. They're doing engineer work. And they're basically like, hey, I'm not trying to be employee of the month. I'm just trying to do enough to not get fired. I'm carrying 2 jobs. And I'm making $500,000 a year. It is insane right now what's going on out there due to the job market, remote work. And I think a lot of that's going to lead to a kind of correction in that trend. It will be very fascinating to see what happens. Chris, this is amazing. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Ben, glad I could join. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who got involved in the comments. There were so many of you on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube. Hit that like button right now. Go over, scroll over, hit that virtual applause button. I think it's the green one. Hit it a bunch of times. Smash that button. Thank you, everybody, for being here today with us. I really appreciate you. God bless. We'll see you.